everyone. Today's lesson for the red group is all about understanding thousandths. So I'm going to go through the video with you, the little PowerPoint with you, just so that you understand what you're doing. Okay, so let's share the screen. Okay, right, so as you can see, this is today's work. When we're talking about thousandths, I want you to think of it in terms of place value and the place value chart that we use. So when we have like ones, tenths, hundredths, thousandths going across the top of our place value chart. Okay, so have that in mind or write it down somewhere if you want to. Okay, question 1 is pretty straightforward because we're using the base 10 blocks. So obviously, if you've got a block like the blue one that you can see here, that represents a whole one. Okay. When we've got a block like the green one, that's a tenth of the blue one. So we would represent that as in 1/10 or 0.1. And then the yellow block that you can see, if you can just see my cursor, I'm just circling the one that I'm looking at. And that's at 100th. So that's 100th of that blue block of that whole one, okay, or 0.01. And then if you've just got the one cube, the red one down here, out of this big blue block, that's 1,000th or 0.001, because there are 1,000 of those little blocks in this big blue block here, okay? So when we're looking at question 1A down here, remember that the blue ones are whole numbers. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 whole numbers, okay? And then we've got 3/10ths, 200ths, and 1,000th. So we would represent that by saying it would be 5.321. So you're basically just writing down what you see, but remember the decimal point comes after your whole number, so after your blue blocks. And if there aren't any blue blocks, as in C here, okay, you still need to represent the blue blocks with a 0. So you would have 0 point and then what you see here. Okay, question 2 up here, it's saying represent each of the numbers below using base 10. Please do not spend forever drawing each of the base 10 blocks. Okay, just draw. You could try and draw a 3D cube if you want to, or just represent them with colours. Okay, so you can just represent the whole number by colouring a square blue. Okay, so please don't spend forever drawing those base 10s. B, use your representations to help you complete the statement. All right, so you've got to write down what's missing basically. If you've got 0.512, we know that that in tenths is 0.5. The hundredths, we've got 0.01 of hundredth, and then thousandths is what they're asking for here in this first one. Okay, so how would you represent that? And remember, you represent all of the other positions with a 0, and it's just the thousandths, that number, digit that you write in. Okay, this one's the same. They've only done the whole number for you, and you've got to represent the tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. And then the last one, you've got to represent each of those, including the whole number. Underneath here, this is 1,000 square, so it's a bit like 100 square. Can you see the larger squares here? And then within that, there are 10 smaller squares or rectangles, 10 parts. And so altogether, there are 1,000 parts in that square. Okay, part of that has been coloured for you. And what you've got to do is talk about what has been coloured. So remember, when you're counting each of those, it's a 10. Okay, 10, 20, 30, and so on. So you first of all explain why you think it's 1,000 square. I've just gone over that. What fraction of the square has been coloured as 1,000th? okay, what fraction do you think has been coloured, and then write it as a decimal. Okay, so think about your place value chart and where the thousandths would sit on that chart. Okay, question 4, what fraction of each square has been shaded? Write each number as a fraction and a decimal. So very similar to question 3, remembering that this is 1,000 square and not 100 square, which was what we're used to looking at. Again, this one underneath here, they've given you the fraction in A and the decimal in B, and you've got to do the shading. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Once these numbers on a place value chart, so you just need to write like this one here. If you're looking down, can you see where my cursor is? Question 8. Okay, you don't need to make it fancy like that. Just have your ones, tenths, hundredths and thousandths across the top, and then put these numbers, these decimals into your chart. Okay, question 7, show that 400,000 over 1,000 is the same as 0.4. So you need to prove it by shading on here. Okay. Underneath, just write down the decimal that you see, write it in order. So start with your ones. Don't forget your decimal point. There it is, look, in between your ones and your tenths, and then just write down what you see. Okay, if there is nothing in the box, like on B here, make sure you represent it with a 0. Okay, we go back, and that's it for today's lesson, Red Group. If you're finding that really easy, then you can have a look at the yellow work. Don't forget, it's always good to challenge yourselves. So see how you go. If you think it's too easy because you've already looked at thousandths and you don't want to go over it again because you didn't have any problems with it, then just have a look at the yellow work and see how you go with that. Okay,